Welcome to the My Personal Football Coach Youth Soccer Player Development Podcast, episode 47 with Anthony Hayes.
Welcome to MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Soccer Player Development Podcast. Discover all the secrets, hints and tips about soccer player development and soccer coaching from some of the leading figures in world soccer. Here's your host, Saul Isaacson-Hurst.
Hi guys, welcome back to the My Personal Football Coach podcast. Look, we're living in very strange times. Been holed up here in the house, almost on lockdown. Look, just the next couple of weeks I'm going to record as many podcasts as possible and try and get you guys as much content as possible to keep you ticking over while we're all stuck here at home. We've had loads and loads of inquiries about the club partnership as well. Please bear with us. We're trying to get all you clubs online. We're doing like a 70% discount, trying to give it as close as cost as possible to help all you clubs out there all around the world, to give you your players some quality e-learning while they're all stuck at home. So please bear with us. Like I said, we're going to get all you guys online ASAP. And so into the show straight away. Basically, we've got a fantastic guest. This was one of the most engaging hours I've had in a long time, speaking to Anthony Hayes, and he's a top class coach. He's currently the coach at Charlton Athletic, does the under 18s there. Charlton Athletic, if you don't know, is one of the best academies in the country. I think it came 7th in a recent poll of in the ratings of the best academies in terms of the players they're producing. Players like Joe Gomez, obviously, is Liverpool. Long, proud track record of producing quality players. And for a relatively small club, they really do produce top draw players. And I think they're category 2 academy, so always punching above their weight. So really interesting to find out, what goes on behind the scenes there, what makes them such a quality academy with such a consistent quality output of players. He's had a great, long, illustrious career in terms of he's worked his way up at Charlton there. Before that, he was at Brentford, working under Ozzy Asbangi at Brentford. People might not understand the quality of provision that was going on at Brentford at the time. Had some of the best coaches and recruitment people in the country there, so he's got a lot of value to share. Talks about his time in America as well, and how he's progressed through the ranks now, working to the 18s. He's a class act and really interesting, engaging guy, so I know you're going to enjoy it. So stay tuned. Like I said, I've got about 6 or 7 podcasts recording in the next week or so I'm going to get them out as quick as possible and try and get all you guys, keep all you guys engaged while we're all stuck inside here. Stay safe, guys. So, Anthony Hayes, welcome to the show. Can you give us a brief description of your playing and coaching journey up to this point, please?
Yeah, so playing wise, from the Republic of Ireland, played in the League of Ireland for 2 clubs, Athlone Town, which is where I'm from. It's the national club where I'm from, and Limerick FC. So overall 6 seasons in League of Ireland from 16 up to just shy of 21. Stopped playing at 20. Did my cruciate ligaments, had my B license. And that's really when my real interest in coaching came. Went to America, lived over there for a year, worked with UK Elite Soccer, met my now wife, who's from London, followed her back to London, got into the community grassroots coaching side of things with Westway Sports Centre first, and then Brentford in the community. Then had an opportunity to get into the academy side of things at Brentford. Got a full-time job there. Was there for 6 seasons in various positions. Obviously, when the academy closed, I moved on to Charlton. I've been there for 4 seasons now. So I'm at Charlton currently. Fantastic.
So a great journey there, great story. So just tell us a little bit about that, the first coaching experience in America. I remember I went to America as well. It was a really important part of my career because I felt just there were so many hours on the grass. A real great place to sort of cut your teeth in the coaching game, as it were. Tell us a little about your experiences out there.
Yeah, I loved it. I think exactly that. I think I looked at it as a chance just to get contact hours because my experience of actually coaching daily was very limited. So I used it for exactly that. The company itself were excellent. They gave us a great variety of opportunities out there, you know, from real young ones, from like 3s and 4s. I think they called it UK Petite. And then you went all the way through, you know, up until, you know, college teams, female, male. Then you had mixed teams as well, recreational stuff. So it was a real broad variety of experiences out there. But the main, I suppose, exposure I got was the contact, which was crucial for me.
What were your first, you know, your major takeaways when you first started coaching there? What were your first experiences like in terms of, like, you know, what are the first lessons you learned in terms of delivering quality sessions and working with all those different age groups?
I think I've always looked at coaching, and probably looking at this from when I was a player, I always wanted to be engaged. I always wanted to be challenged. I always wanted to be inspired. And I suppose my greatest taken from America, obviously getting the experience to coach regularly, was if you could have a group of mixed ability kids, mixed gender kids, you know, male, female, boys, girls, and inspire them and engage them for an hour, 75 minutes, 90 minutes, challenge them in a variety of ways. That for me was always the biggest, I don't know, the biggest feeling I got coming away from it, that, yeah, I've actually helped, affected, challenged, motivated, inspired. And that's what I've taken with me. And obviously, when I started, I wanted to try and get into the professional game full time. And I feel if you can inspire those kids who have less ability, and obviously, you know, you're working with, you know, lesser equipment, not great facilities, but if the kids can come away with, you know, a bit of a sweat on, you know, they've enjoyed it, there's a nice feel and buzz around, I think you've half done your job.
For me, you know, one of my the original takeaways there was really about personality. Like you mentioned that, about working with, especially those younger ones. I remember doing those, you know, 4 or 5-year-old camps, 3 hours, where, you know, the players couldn't really kick a ball, but it was just about delivering like you say, delivering something which is going to catch their imagination. And I think I even took that into academy football with like 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s, about that intensity and keeping that captive audience. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think, you know, my skill set, which I'm sure we'll come to, I think my skill set is best suited to, you know, probably 15s and above. When I first started, naturally you work with, you know, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. And even when I first came into the academy at Brentford, I worked at under 10s, 11s and 12s. And I think it's a totally different skill set. I think the more skillful coaches are those coaches, because you nearly become an actor. To try and, you know, inspire, enthuse, you have to obviously go down to their level in terms of how you communicate, how you demonstrate, how you speak to kids, you know, one-to-one or even in a group setting. So 100%. I remember one of the games they used to do, I think it was called Shrek or something like that, but, you know, you used to get kids, and these are the real young American kids now, 3 and 4, hiding behind the football. And you used to have to join in with another coach leading it, and little things like that, just to kind of get on their level. But I think you nearly become an actor when you work with that real young level of kids. And I do think the coaches who specialise in those areas are real good actors, because I mean actors in terms of, you know, like they're able to get on their level, not as if they're pretending, but, you know, they speak to the kids at their level. And they're able to get wonderful buy-in from the kids because of how they interact.
Yeah, I mean, I worked under Tim Bradbury, who's a coach educator out there, still one of the best I've ever worked under and met. And he said the same, you know, you have to have a personality. If you don't have one, make one up. Like you said, like be an actor, right? And it's about, you know, getting into those players and doing it. But talk a little bit about that. You know, another one for me was like you mentioned there about working with the 5s and you're working with the college players as well. It's a great, you know, football education, isn't it? Soccer education, because you are getting so many hours on the grass with different age groups. What was your major, like, the differences between working with those different age groups out there?
Yeah, well, the variety was key, because, you know, like we just spoke about, when you work with the younger ones, you have to behave and act and speak in a totally different way than when you're dealing with, the college kids. And the college kids are at a good level over there. Technically there wouldn't be, and listen, my experience was coming from Ireland, so I had no experience of obviously the English game when I went to America. So technically I actually thought the players weren't bad, and I thought physically the players were actually excellent in America. And the biggest, I suppose, the biggest challenge, I suppose, is then how you then communicate to the older age groups, because as you well know, the older the players are, the more savvy they get, the more nous they get, probably have a little bit more personality and character, and then you have to make sure the challenge remains appropriate for them. And I think the older you get, the challenge has to get harder and harder and harder, because you're getting obviously closer to the senior game. But just a massive difference and a variety of experience between working with the kids, the real young kids, to then working with the college boys and girls. And my main experience with the college was with girls. And the level of women's football in America was at a high level. That was back in 2010. And that's been proven in recent years, with obviously their successes nationally.
So then, how long were you out in the States for?
Only 11 months. Only did 11 months out in America.
And whereabouts were you in there?
I was in New Jersey. So I was based in a town called Summit in New Jersey, and I was mainly working out of the New Jersey area.
Okay, so you said you met your wife to be, and you decided to travel back to London. So then you come back and you work. You get a job at Westway Sports Centre. I know Westway very well. I was at a session the other day. Very different sort of group, I imagine. Very different sort of catchment area, so we say. Very different type of players, personality-wise, and obviously socio-economic and stuff like that. So tell us a little bit about that.
No, so the opportunity came. One of the lads I worked with in UK Elite put me in touch with Robin Mallinson, who was the head of football Westway. I'm not sure if Robin is still there. I know he was down in Southampton. But when I came to London, I didn't have a job, so I was living in my uncle's flat, who he kindly put me up, and I was basically out trying to get work. And Westway was kind of my first piece of part-time work, and it was with communities, community programs, grassroots programs, and again it was the real younger age groups, 6, 7s, 8s. You're talking about 20, 30 kids in one of those 7v7 cages, and trying to, 1, design a practice, 2, trying to deliver a practice, and 3, trying to satisfy all these mixed ability kids from various different backgrounds. And it was a real challenge. Found it really, really tough initially, but then I suppose you get to grips, because obviously London kids are different to Irish kids, are different to American kids. They have a little bit about them, some more so than others. And then as well as that, in the 7s and 8s, you would have players who have been into pro clubs, and have been at a host of pro clubs at that age. So you would have some real, I wouldn't call them A grade players, but you could have some B plus grade players, and then you could have players who could barely walk or kick a ball. So you had to try and diversify your practice, differentiate your practice, and try and make it enjoyable and challenging for everyone. But again, I really enjoyed it, and it was my first real taste of coaching in England, and I think it's really helped shape me, because you mentioned the word personality, and that's a big part of it, and I think you're constantly trying to find what your personality is as a coach, and then you try and transfer that into your coaching style. Now you carry and conduct yourself, but I also think how you communicate is so important with people, and I suppose the communication side of things, as well as the diversity, was a wonderful learning experience there.
I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? You said you come from Ireland and you've gone to America. I've worked in America as well, New Jersey, very wealthy communities mostly, and then you've gone into Westway, where there's a big inner city community, a lot of working class kids, probably a bit round off the edges, and sort of must have been that. Was that the challenge in terms of the different sort of dynamics and having to motivate and communicate with the different sorts of personalities?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was the difference in the ability. So, like I said, you'd have 6, 7, 8-year-olds who had been and were going into pro clubs. Some even signed to pro clubs, and you were talking about maybe the Chelseas and Fulhams and clubs like that. And then, like I said, you would have normal run of the mill kids who just wanted to play for participation, enjoyment, social interaction. So you had to kind of marry those two up, and then you were kind of dealt the hand of a very confined space to work in. So, if you wanted to finish your training session with games, which everyone wants to do, and you have 25 players, how do you do that in a clever design where everyone gets a little bit of equal playing time? You make it competitive, but also you make it quite competitive for the better players as well. So you have to be quite clever in how you match players up, and even that came into my thinking. But Robin, to be fair to him, was very keen on running it like a mini academy. So he wanted things like discipline imparted amongst the kids, and he ran it professionally. So again, it was a good initial grounding for me when I first came over.
So how do you do that, by the way, with the 25 kids in a 7-a-side cage with match time? What did you do?
So normally had 4 teams, and what you would try and do is have obviously 2 playing, 1 off. You would have probably 2 or 3 coaches, and we would all be sessional coaches, but you would have 1 coach that would lead and probably another coach or possibly 2 coaches that would assist. So you would have a game going on, you would try and have one coach working with another team, if you want, like technically, like literally in a corner of a pitch, like ball against the wall type thing, and then another group literally watching the games and maybe doing the task on the games just to try and keep their involvement. And that was how we did it.
And I'm interested, like in your early stages of your career, I mean, what tell me about the process of session design and how that came about, and what did you draw on to do that? I mean, and having to be adaptable in all these situations.
Yeah, well, again, it probably started in America because, again, there was a guy in America called Steve Jones for UK Elite Soccer, and he had experiences in England of working with Everton and Liverpool, and he was massive on planning sessions and getting into the habit of planning out your sessions for any eventuality, but running off themes, so there's a continuity of learning. So that was kind of my first initial I suppose, after the coach education side of things, experience of, okay, well, this is how you try and plan. So, warm up, it could be a technical practice, skill practice, and a game, as an example. So I got into the habit of doing that very, very early in America, and I transferred that into Westway. But I was a bit selfish in Westway as well, because I tried things out. I tried sessions out, and I used it as a case of, well, I'm delivering to a real variety of kids, but I'm going to try and better myself here as well by trying sessions out that I like, that I haven't done before, that maybe I had ideas for, that I could tweak and refine, and then ultimately try and improve them. So I was a little bit selfish in that regard, working at Westway as well. But I've always, since my time in America, got into the habit of planning sessions, having a framework to work and manoeuvre from, but that's also improved during my time specifically at Brentford, which I'm sure we'll come to.
Well, let's go on to Brentford. I mean, that's around the corner from Westway, if you like, down the road, a West London academy. Tell us about how that opportunity came about.
So it came about. My brother-in-law is Nico Yanaris, used to play at Arsenal. So his dad knew Sean O'Connor, because Sean obviously was the head of recruitment at Arsenal, or not head of recruitment, but he was involved in recruitment at Arsenal. And then Sean was brought into Brentford. So, I was trying to get into clubs. I went into Arsenal, met with Liam Brady, but there was nothing going. And obviously you're not going to take a chance on an Irish kid with no coaching experience in England, even though I had a B licence. But Brentford were obviously an academy that were very much so up and coming. And my father-in-law basically said, listen, send me your CV, I'll send it on to Sean O'Connor. Sean came back to me, and I met Stuart English, who was basically the assistant academy manager to Ozzy Abanji. Had a chat with Stu, and for around, I would say, 10 weeks, I went down, off my own accord, just to watch and observe and see how they'd done things. And I was very fortunate because, for me, Brentford will will and still is, I still speak to the staff that are there. It's a very unique, forward-thinking, innovative environment. And for me, when I first kind of entered that in February 2011, I was surrounded by people who had wonderful experiences in the game, but also young people and young coaches who were desperate to learn and get better. So the environment was perfect for me. So you had Ozzy Abanji, who obviously spearheaded it, Sean O'Connor from a recruitment point of view, who for me is the best in the business, Miguel Rios, who assisted him, and Miguel's an excellent recruiter as well and very knowledgeable. Then you had, from a coaching point of view, again, Ozzy with his experiences, Stuart English, who's now Birmingham City's assistant academy manager, Danny Buck, who was excellent with me when I first joined, as was people like Josh Hinkson, who's at Arsenal now, I believe. He used to pick me up in Housden and bring me to the training sessions and drop me back, and I used to get a bus from Housden because I was living in Wilsden at the time. Gabriel Flores, John D'Souza, so many good coaches that were down there that I could learn from, and obviously I can call them pals now. I still speak to them, meet up with them, but a wonderful environment to work in. And really, that I would say that 18-month period from February 2011, 18 months was an unbelievable acceleration of learning for me, because I was exposed, challenged, failed, and was just in an excellent environment that wanted the best for the kids first and foremost, but also wanted to develop the staff.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people don't understand, the wealth of world-class talent that Brentford accumulated there. So Ozzy, I know Ozzy quite well. I was very close to going there myself, actually. But obviously Danny Buck, who's been on the show, is one of my mentors. I worked under Spurs with, unbelievable. Like say Sean O'Connor, the best in the game. Ozzy's top drawer. John D'Souza, she had some top coaches. All these, amazing world-class environment. It's a relatively small club in West London. And and it often gets forgotten. Obviously, it was very sadly when they closed it. And people only see now maybe the quality of all the players that came out of that programme is quite unbelievable in terms of the quality that they managed to produce there on this very small budget.
Yeah, it was. Listen, I look back on it, and like I said, unbelievable people. It was a very, very, very good club. Still is a very good club. It's a club that's obviously going places with their first team now. They're certainly in the hunt for promotion. They've obviously got the new stadium as well. And they're unique, and they're thinking, it was obviously sad for us all when the academy closed, because we felt we were, 5 years, 6 years into a 10-year project that was initially backed, and then obviously, wasn't. But you have to respect the decision. We've all moved on, and I think that's a testament of the people that were there, but also the players that were there. The majority of the players have moved on to good clubs, are finding their way in the game, and the staff, the majority of us have all moved on to find positions at other clubs, both in full-time positions as well as in part-time positions. So it's a testament to particularly how Ozzy ran it, because his way of, I suppose, developing coaches didn't suit everyone, but it suited me because I wanted to be a bit of a sponge, but I could also take a little bit of a battering. And I suppose from a coach development side of things, that's where I felt Ozzy, Stuart English and John D'Souza were a very, very good mix, because Ozzy could be quite blunt and quite harsh. Stuart would put your arm around the shoulder, and John had the detail. And I think between the three who ran our coach education programme, it was an excellent mix. And for me, the exact learning that I needed at that time in my career, and I'm forever grateful to those people. And you mentioned Danny Buck being a mentor, and Bucky was superb with me when I first started. I really did a lot of shadowing of him initially, because he used to have, I remember going up to London Maccabi, under 15-16 session, used to have nearly 40 players initially, because they were obviously trying to get players in the door and improve the level of the squad, and how he used to work them, and I mean work them. And you obviously know Danny quite well, but brilliant, brilliant learning curve. And those people, Ozzy, Sean O'Connor, Stuart Lingish, John D'Souza, Danny Buck, I'd all consider them to be mentors if I had an issue or question, and I speak to them regularly anyway. I'd happily pick up the phone and just say, what do you think of this, and get some advice from them. But it was an excellent environment.
So tell us then, what were your first impressions then? You go in there, you talked about going and observing. What were your first things that you noticed about it?
Standards. That was the first thing. Standards are what was expected in terms of punctuality, what was expected in terms of how you look. It was black boot rule with Aussie. Many people disagree with that. But also then shin pads, shirt tucked into your shorts. So a real lot around discipline, and then ultimately a lot around how you work. And a big thing for Aussie was, as time went on, he wanted practices that were bespoke and differentiated. But initially, it was a case of, well, let's get the groups working. He didn't want to see sessions where, half the group weren't working. There was cues, and he always wanted at least 50% of the group working. And I remember, I was observing. It must have been 6 or 7 weeks, and I remember going to, I forget the place now. It was somewhere in West London where they were based out of a school. It was a sand-based AstroTurf, and I was still observing, 6 or 7 weeks in, and literally I was balls, bibs and cones, and taking notes and asking questions and getting balls in when they were doing practices and things like that, which I don't think enough young coaches want to do now, but that's another discussion. But I remember it was the first time I had met Aussie, because my initial contact was with Sean and then with Stuart. So Aussie came over to me and said, "Who are you? And what's your name and what are you doing?" And it was a Tuesday night. I'll never forget it. And he said to me, "Okay, lovely to meet you." And he walked over to Stu and he said, "Stu, I want Anthony to coach next. I just want him to put on a session for a half an hour." And that was what Aussie was like. He would make coaches sink or swim. And ultimately, there's nerves. You have to think on your feet. I delivered a session. I remember having a chat with Aussie and Stuart afterwards. I can't really remember the conversation afterwards, but it went along the lines of, "I like you, but you need to slow down how you talk." Obviously, I was Irish, so I had a flatter accent than what I have now. I've been over here nearly 10 years, but after that, I was allowed to come in twice a week to work with a group and then take a game at the weekend. So that was kind of my introduction into it, along with, like I said, the standards, the disciplines, and then actually getting the players working.
I think you've mentioned that a couple of times, getting the players working, and obviously I remember when Chris Ramsey, when again my first job, described Bucky as Danny Buck as saying, gets the kids working hard, and that's what, to me, like you say, when you go into your first environment, as my first environment, the major things that sink in. And when I talk about academy sessions, that's what I pick about. The difference between maybe an academy session and a grassroots session is maybe the intensity, and everyone's at it and everyone's going for it and they're fighting and there's battling, and that's what everyone's work. If you like you say, you come out, everyone should come out sweating, going, wow, that was like an intense experience. I mean, I think there are people that maybe I think that's really important. You said it a couple of times. I think for me as well, that's what I took away from my first experience in those sorts of academy environments.
That was, Aussie wanted that initially because it was obviously it was a massive project. I don't think people can really and truly from the outside looking in see how big a project it actually was, and how far Aussie and the group of staff that were there took it, as well as obviously the players that were recruited, which is testament to the likes of Sean, Miguel and their team. But the main thing when we first started was he wanted the players to be working, and then he wanted it to be challenging. So another example I remember, again, probably this is a month later, and again I was working with kind of a variety of age groups, because I wanted just to get my hands dirty. I wanted to be around it as much as I could, so I was doing Westway a couple of days a week. I was doing Brentford now, twice a week with the games at the weekend, but I wanted to observe. I wanted to watch people like Danny Buck. I wanted to watch Aussie when he was delivering. I wanted to watch Stuart English with the young players, who I think it was a specialist with those young players. And I just wanted to observe, be a sponge, ask questions. But I remember I was delivering a possession practice for, I think it was an under 12 group, and I was delivering it, and I thought it was going okay. I felt a decent feel for it. a decent buzz coming off the players. And then Ozzy came over beside me, watched for around 5 minutes and said, Anthony, I need you to change this. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to change it. And if you don't change it, I'm going to change it for you. And for some coaches, they weren't able to handle that. I really enjoyed that. If you want to call it working under a little bit of pressure. And I tried to change it. And at the end, what I really liked about Ozzy, it wasn't a case he was trying to pick the nuts and bolts out of you or make you look like a clown. He wanted things to be better for the players, and he would say, I didn't like it because of X, Y, and Z. But I liked what you tried to do to change it. And then he would say, well, this is where I'm coming from. And you would leave under no illusion what he wanted. But he wouldn't hold it against you. As soon as, and I had many... if you want to call it Aussie hairdryers, if you want to call it that. But it was a case of, at the end of it, you would walk out of the room and he would hold nothing against you, nor would I towards him. And I just used that as a massive learning curve. And like I said, the good thing about it was you had Ozzy, who had that style, and then you had Stuart and John, who had a different style. And married up between the three of them, it was perfect for not only myself, but I'm sure many of the other staff down there would testify to the same.
And tell us a bit about what was the methodology there at the club. What was the playing philosophy, the coaching philosophy? What did it look like?
I suppose the playing philosophy was, wanted to be an attractive, forward-thinking, exciting brand of football. That was the playing philosophy. It wouldn't be totally different to many academies, I suppose, around the country. I suppose the coaching was, for me, the biggest difference, because one, saying it again, the players worked extremely hard, and that was expected out of them. I thought we had a terrific programme. Probably you could argue we had too much variety within the programme, but you would have, the teams would be in 3-4 nights a week, and each day would be different. So you would have a technical day, you would have a futsal day, you would have a position specific or an individual needs day, and then you would obviously have your game day. So there was wonderful variety for the staff, as well as wonderful variety for the players. And the coaching was, I suppose, the biggest thing was he wanted, and this is Aussie, came from Aussie, but obviously drip fed by other staff, but practices that were bespoke. So highlighting individual needs of the better players, because that's who we're there for. At least 50% of the group working. There had to be what ifs in your session. So in every session there had to be a what if question moment. It had to be enjoyable and challenging, and players had to fail because obviously it can't look nice. It had to look at times a little bit like organised chaos and a little bit messy. So I suppose that would be probably how I would summarise it. And the biggest thing then was the values. So, I spoke about the discipline, the hard work, and he demanded that, and he wanted those values to shine through in the sessions as well, where, there's no excuses. Players get there on time. Players work hard. Players react positively if things go wrong. Players conduct themselves in the right manner. And then that was, I suppose, delivered through us all. That was consistently delivered. So I suppose I've kind of spoken about a few things, but
But what about like for instance, like session design? Then in terms of like, where do you come? You've been told this is what I'm looking for. Where do you, is there some sort of, what's the CPD like there? In terms of like Brentford type sessions.
In terms of the syllabus, so the syllabus was it was 4 weeks. It was 4-week blocks, and you had different themes. And again, that lessened as time went on. It was there obviously from 2011, I would say, right up until 2014-15 season, where it was 4 weeks blocked learning, and it was very specific. So, for example, August, say, was your theme was passing with a purpose, and that was the theme, and under the theme you had branched out and switching play, playing in between players, playing around, playing through, playing over, wall passes, combination play. So that would be your theme for the month, and you would work your 4 different types of sessions towards that theme. So your technical day, your skill day, your position-specific or individual needs, that would be based more so towards either player profiles or the individual needs of players. And then you would have your futsal day along with your match day. So I suppose we worked off different themes and different topics month by month. That changed towards the end, where obviously we had established ourselves as a bit of a reputation, and rather than the learning being blocked, he wanted to be more random learning, so we could tweak and kind of flip in between different types of topics. I don't know if that explains or answers your question. In terms of designing sessions, so a lot of my time at Brentford, so when I first joined, I worked with the 10s. That was part-time for the rest of the 2011-2012 season. And then in May 2012, I was the head coach for the 11s and 12s. So it would be my remit with the coaches that were working with me to plan the session, give them parts of the session, but for them to plan themselves and to add their own personality to it, whilst working towards the theme as well as what the players needed. If that makes sense.
Interesting, yeah. And look, we all know you're only as good as the players you've got in the academy. You've got Sean O'Connor there and Miguel Rios, probably two of the best recruiters in academy football and football generally in the country. Tell us a little bit about that, because you got how important was having those good quality players coming through, but obviously then you got a lot of rough diamonds as well, I suppose.
Yeah, and again, Sean, I hold Sean O'Connor in such high regard, as I do Miguel, but Sean was the one who kind of, I suppose, opened the door for me at Brentford, so I'll always be grateful to Sean for that, and I continue to speak to Sean and liaise with Sean and take advice off Sean. In terms of his eye for players and the experience that he has within the game, it's well documented about Jack Wilshere and Alex Iwobi and people like that. But Sean has recruited so many players, has a vast experience of a cycle of development for young players. And for me, it's very difficult to assess potential. But Sean, for me, there's very few, if any, that Sean has said to me that he'll stop at a certain age and he hasn't got it right. His ability to assess potential is, for me, the best I've seen in the game. And in terms of Miguel, Miguel was terrific, particularly with the younger age groups. Miguel done a fantastic job with the pre-academy side of things and that younger age group for us. And that was the last group that was under 13s, 12s, 13s when the academy closed, and the majority of those players have gone on to sign for the likes of Chelsea, Man City, Fulham, Arsenal, and again that's testament to Miguel and how he recruited, and I suppose their strategy and the procedures and process that they put in place and the team that they put in place and how then they branched out around London was phenomenal, really. So listen, you can't run an academy without recruitment. Recruitment comes first.
Lovely. So listen, obviously then, unfortunately the academy closes, and then so you're out of work. How long were you out of work for?
Well, I was fortunate. One of the last tours we did at Brentford, we went to Athens for a week under 13 tournament, which we actually won. Ozzy was there with myself and another coach, Aziz Akambulu, and Ozzy kind of had said to us, listen, there's going to be an announcement next week, you need to look after yourselves. So Ozzy was obviously as transparent as what he could be, so I actually picked up the phone to quite a few people. Chris Ramsey was one of them, Steve Avery was another at Charlton. And fortunately at the time, and I'm a big believer in opportunity and timing aligning for you to have a chance. And just at that point, Charlton were looking to recruit 2 members of staff. So Brentford closed, I think it was the end of May, and in the first week of June I had 3 interviews. I went into QPR with a couple of other members of the Brentford staff. That was through Aussie. I had a chat with Chris. I went up to Hull City for an interview for the 18s job, and I went into Charlton for an interview for 2 positions. And I got a phone call back from Hull, and I got a phone call back from Charlton. Didn't fancy moving up to Hull because I just bought a house in London with my wife, and went to Charlton. So I was fortunate. I was out of work for probably 3 weeks before I kind of knew where my future was going to lie.
Wow, that's pretty decent. Not bad, really, is it?
No.
in a footballing world, a lot of people might, knows being out of work sometimes comes with the territory for a little bit of time.
Yeah. I think it's probably more so associated with first team level. There's not many 2 cases where you see people getting dismissed, or made redundant from an academy point of view. So again, you talk about an experience, being made redundant, never nice. The hardest thing was obviously saying goodbye to the club, saying goodbye to the staff, and saying goodbye to the players, particularly the players. That was the hardest thing, because I was there for 6 seasons, and you obviously create bonds and relationships, and that was hard. But it's been lovely ever since, because you come across them at different clubs and you see how they're progressing, and it's great, that fills you with a little bit of pride, more so for me, someone like, say, Chris Mepham, you talk about Sean O'Connor. Sean O'Connor sees Chris Mepham as a 15-year-old kid playing men's football at Greenford, and brings him in. He's been told by 3 or 4 other clubs that he's not good enough, and within 4 years he's playing in our first team as a full Welsh international, and then gets sold for £15 million. Wow. What a great story that is. But yeah, I think never nice being made redundant, but again, like I said, I was very fortunate with the timing and the opportunity that arrived at Charlton as well as at Hull, and I had to go up there, and I did an interview up there with Hull, and that was a good experience. I went in to see Chris, and I really like Chris Ramsey. I've got a lot of time for Chris Ramsey and what he thinks, how he thinks, and how he tries to do things, as probably you well know from your time at Tottenham with him. But
So you go into Charlton, you take this great opportunity, and tell us a bit about that. Then, what were your first impressions? What are the differences, the similarities of being at Brentford? So,
I suppose the difference immediately was, and this is one thing I think again we would all acknowledge at Brentford, was we definitely had a good group of players, and we definitely had talented players. What Brentford didn't offer, I didn't feel enough of at the time, was the opportunity and pathway to get into our first team. So you listen, you could argue about were they ready, were they not, but that was something for me when I immediately went into Charlton. So that one, to have South London boys, a different breed to what I experienced at Brentford, because at Brentford we had a lot of West London boys, middle class. We had a couple of South London boys, such as Giancarlo Poveda, Josh Bowie, and they were a different breed. And I went into Charlton, and you've predominantly South London boys, Kent boys, and they are a little bit of a different breed. They've got a bit about them. They've got a lot of personality. But what Charlton offered immediately was a pathway, as well as the opportunity. So that was the biggest thing I saw at Charlton. At the time, Ademola Lookman was there, Esri Konsa was there, Carlin Grant was there. These are all boys that I had seen during my time at Brentford from a distance. But then you go in, and I initially started, very family club, a real community spirit to the club, and that remains. But they've got very talented kids, don't get me wrong, but they get an opportunity to train, and then they get an opportunity to play in the first team. And that's going to continue at Charlton because of the continuity of staffing, with Steve being there for so long, other members of staff being there for so long, but they've got players who are good enough, and when they're good enough, they get given an opportunity, which I think it's half the battle.
And what about what? Sorry to interrupt you, mate, because I know we're pressed for time, so we'll just get as much of this juicy content as possible. So just tell us about, practically though, in terms of what was going on in the grass, and the plan and the preparation. What were the differences, or or the similarities? I mean, what was it? A different sort of environment?
It was different. Yeah, it was different because from at Brentford, the support team that you had at Brentford, in terms of I never even touched on the video analysis at Brentford. Like, unbelievable people that worked in the video analysis side of things. Neil McAlargy, I think he's at Manchester United now. Zahir Shaw, Zarius Desai, I'm going to leave people out here now, but that department at Brentford was absolutely influential in supporting the programme and helping to develop players, as well as the strength and conditioning team, as well as the medical team. And at Charlton, the resources you could see were purely going towards the football department. So you were limited in terms of video analysis, even though they have a video analysis department and that's branching out now. But they were limited in terms of that. The sports science program was developing, as well as the medical program. But you could see the majority of their thinking went towards the football program. And how I would describe Charlton is it's a football academy that's a teaching academy. It prides itself on teaching the kids. Steve wants the players to be taught. He wants them to know detail. He wants them to repeat practices for learning benefits. So there was subtle differences. But again, Steve is massive on discipline. And that was seen from the outset. You know, it won't be tolerated, players turning up late for training. Again, black boot rule, which I experienced at Brentford. So discipline is a big thing on Steve's agenda. But the biggest, I suppose, difference would be, so say for example at Brentford you had, you know, a minimum 50% of the group working. Steve wouldn't, although he wouldn't want cues, he would want the players to be learning. So he wouldn't mind coaches stopping it, going through detail, and stopping the group at times. There obviously has to be a balance. You couldn't do that 4 days a week because you'd lose the players. But the biggest difference was Charlton is a teaching academy. I'm not saying Brentford wasn't a teaching academy. We just taught in different ways at Brentford and used a variety of styles. Charlton's very much a case of Steve wants coaches to get their elbows, get their sleeves up, get their elbows dirty, and go in and coach the nitty-gritty detail.
And you know, Charlton's got an unbelievable, phenomenal record in terms of player development, bringing players through, and now first team, you know, players all around the Premier League, Joe Gomez, all those players like that. And what's the secret? Why are they so successful? Why do they overperform for a Cat 2 academy? You know, why? Remember the recent league tables that came out? They were near the top.
Seventh.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, unbelievable achievement for such a modest budget, most likely. Or, you know, so what's the secret there?
I think you can't get away from the area. First of all, listen, it's a hotbed of football, South London. You know, you've got teams from up north coming down, setting up development centres in Lambeth. You know, it's a hotbed of football, South London. So you've got a talent pool of players, and a vast talent pool of players that you can select from. You know, South London, Kent, it's a huge area. They love the football, and again, fortunately, at Charlton, and it's taken a bit of time to get the right people, I think, there. But Bert Dawkins is now our head of recruitment, and Bert is as close, for me, what I've seen, to someone like a Miguel and Sean. He's vast amount of experience. He's out watching games. He has great contacts, and he understands potential. He understands development from the conversations that we have frequently. So he's been vital, I think, to getting players in, and he was at the club previously, left and then came back. You know, I'm sure he was the one who recruited Esri Konsa, as an example, at under 11, left and then has come back and has since seen Esri obviously go to Brentford first and then on to Aston Villa. I think then secondly, you've got the continuity of staff. So Steve Avery's been there for nearly, I think, maybe if not more than 20 years. That helps, and Steve has been spearheading it. And then you've got the likes of Joe Francis, our head of education, who's been there 19 years. That helps. Rhys Williams, the lead youth development coach, has been there, I think, 14 years or 13 years. So all these people, Dave Chatwin, the lead foundation phase coach, I think has been there 9-10 years. So you've got this real continuity of staff at the various stages that understand the club, know how the club works, understands the fabric of the community and the range of players. Because listen, although we're in South London, we are limited resource-wise on where we can go and what players we can get in. So we have to utilise contacts, grassroots clubs, Bert's experience, the staff's experience, Steve's experience on getting players in. So I think all of that helps. But I think it ultimately boils down to when you get to the top end, when you get to that PDP phase, if you've got players who are good enough, they're going to train with the first team. They're going to get exposure to getting in front of the senior management. And if they're good enough, they're going to get a chance. There's a great story about Ademola Lookman. I wasn't at the club then, but Ademola Lookman comes in with a London FA side, under 16s game, the last game of the under 16 calendar year before their break for summer. He gets offered a scholarship after the game, and within 18 months is playing in Charlton's first team. After 24 months is sold to Everton for £11 million.
Wow.
Unbelievable. But I think those three elements, the area, the continuity of staff, that retention, I think, has been crucial under various different management structures and ownership structures in difficult times. And then the opportunity and pathway, that's so clear for me. There's very few clubs in the country, I think, that can tell parents at under 9 that, listen, if your kid can come through the pathway with us, you're going to have a pathway at first team level. I don't believe there's many clubs in the country that can offer that pathway.
Okay, and talking about pathway, then you move up the age groups to the development phase, the end of that, the development cycle. Tell us about that then. What were the main challenges about that, working out the top end of the academy environment?
Yeah, I think that's where, first of all, I think we initially spoke about personality. I think my personality is more suited towards that 15s and above age group. After a year at Brentford, I then assisted the under 18s for 2 seasons, for 1 season under Jeremy Steele and then 1 season under John D'Souza. And those 2 years were a wonderful experience for me. At the end of that, I had a chat with Ozzy, and Ozzy actually switched me with another member of staff to then lead the youth development phase. So although I went back down to the 13s to 16 spectrum, Ozzy wanted me to manage staff. He wanted me not only to take an age group, I took the 15s and 16s with Danny Buck. He wanted me to manage members of staff. So again, going back to developing the staff was very high on the agenda at Brentford, as well as obviously doing what's right by the players. And then I come to Charlton. I was 16s lead for 2 years, then assistant to Sergi Baltaccia, and then I've led it this season for the first time. And I think ultimately for me, my goal or my aim now is to specialise in the 16s to 18s category, because I think it's where my skill set is best suited, but I also think it's the biggest window of opportunity when players leave the schoolboy programme and then enter the full-time programme work, if you like, for the first time. So for me, that's the biggest challenge.
And what are what are the daily practical challenges that are working with players at that who are so close to who've made it all the way, and the older boys? I mean, your communication, your motivation. You talk about you got a FA Youth Cup game coming up. What's the challenges there?
No, listen, I think the FA Youth Cup first and foremost. Whether you try and play it down or not, players put it on a pedestal, staff put it on a pedestal. It's the pinnacle of your youth playing career, and it's a game fixtures that you all look forward to. We had a wonderful experience this year against West Ham United, going the full round. Finished 3-3 after extra time, and we win on penalties. It was a wonderful experience for everyone involved, and we weren't expected to win it. So those memories will stick with the players and staff for the rest of their lives. Brilliant. In terms of the challenges, listen, at the end of the day, they're young adults. They want to become players. I think a big thing is devoting time to individual players. Although you manage a group of players, it's devoting individual time to players on a daily basis. And I think I manage 22 scholars, 20 scholars, 2 extended schoolboys, and I think the biggest thing for me is, yes, I'll want to challenge the players daily in the group sessions. I'll want to target individual plans within training sessions, but I also want to spend time with players individually. I want to spend time with players going through clips. I want to spend time with players asking them how they are, how they're doing, if they're out injured, if they've got bits and pieces going on in the background at home. I want to try and get to know the player a little bit better. And then for me, it's all about the relationships then. If you can develop those relationships, you see and learn how people tick. But then the umbrella of it is you give them the boundaries that they're allowed to operate within. And then I've been very fortunate. The players that I now manage with the 18s, I had them at under 15s, 16s in my first year, 2 seasons at Charlton as well. So they know how I work, and I kind of know how they operate as well. So, but I think a lot of it boils down to relationships.
And what about in terms of like tactically? I mean, how do you develop that? I mean, how much do you take from, you know, the modern game, watching, you know, your Liverpools, your Man Cities, or the Charlton first team play, that sort of thing?
Yeah, and I think we have a Charlton way. I think most clubs have a way of playing now, and Charlton have a way of playing that's been consistent, I would say, for the last probably 10 years. You know, they play two playing systems at the development stages, and I'll include that up to under 18, so pre-academy all the way through to 18s, and that's a 4-4-2 diamond and a 4-3-3. Naturally, at under 23, you start to get a little bit closer to the first team, and you're dictated to by obviously the players that you have. So, you know, don't get me wrong, you know, you look at the likes of, you know, Liverpool currently and Man City, and you gain great inspiration from those type of coaches and managers. But we have a way of doing things at Charlton that is spearheaded by Steve, and obviously we all fall in line with that. I think one thing that we have spoken about at under 18 level is at Charlton, and I suppose this is probably one of the biggest differences to my time at Brentford, is there's the learning to win is a big part of the Charlton way, not to the detriment of the development of the individual player, but learning how to win games of football becomes even more apparent, you know, the higher you get on that youth development spectrum, so 15s, 16s, and certainly as you go into 18s. And I think one thing we've spoken about quite a lot at the club is how do you develop, I suppose, excellent managers. So you've got obviously development coaches, and I'll consider myself to be a developer, but how do you develop excellent managers, and how do you affect games positively from the sideline? And I'm just talking about matches now, I'm not talking about the training side of things. So you're tactically, if you change things, whether that's a change of shape, and obviously we've got 2 that we flirt with. You know, we don't, unless we're chasing a game, we have, if you want to call it, a plan B if we're chasing a game. But we've got 2 systems that we tinker between, and then obviously a change of personnel. So we speak a lot at the club about how do you develop, I don't know, elite coaches that might go on from a development cycle into maybe transitioning into the senior game. And there's been examples of that at Charlton. You know, Nathan Jones was at Charlton under 23 coach, and obviously went on to do a fantastic job at Luton. So it's something that we do speak about.
And what about, I mean, yourself? Like, obviously now you talked about the Youth Cup there. Suddenly, you know, results matter. I mean, obviously, they all matter, but suddenly, you know, you win, you lose. You're going to win the cup. You're not going to win the cup. You're in the next round. What was that like in terms of the pressure cooker on the sideline? You talked about it a bit there, like dealing, you know, affecting the game from the sidelines. But just tell us about the different, you know, what is different about that, and how do you deal with those additional pressures?
Yeah, I think so. One thing again, a difference between Charlton and Brentford. Brentford never done opposition analysis. So this is at under 18s level I'm talking about now. At Charlton, we do opposition analysis on a Friday. So we'd have an idea of, you know, maybe the system that the opposition will play, their playing style, with and without the ball. And then set plays. That would be like the basis of most of our meetings. So straight away that was different, but I enjoyed that from my own learning because it was different. It was something I never experienced before, but it's something that Charlton have done, have always believed in. So why would I try and, you know, break that curve when it's not broken? So I embraced that. In terms of you know, sideline behavior and stuff, I think the biggest challenge for me personally is always trying to be the balance between, you know, being loud and being quiet. You know, being loud to maybe help someone or affect the team or give someone a polite reminder, or whether it's, you know, be silent and let them figure it out. Let me observe. Let me take a step back. I think for me currently that's one of my biggest development areas as a coach come game day. In terms of the FA Youth Cup, there was no pressure on us because, and I'm talking about this season. I remember last season we played a non-league side last year in the first round at the Valley, and that was pressure because we were expected to win. You can't go out in the first round to a non-league side at the Valley. So there was probably more pressure in that game than there was when we played West Ham United away at Dagenham, because West Ham Cat 1 Academy, fantastic history and tradition of developing players. And what I said to the players was, we're going to give it a real go, and we're going to go toe-to-toe and trying to impose our style on it. But ultimately, I've got no doubts in my mind that there'll be players in West Ham's team and there'll be players in our team that will go on and represent both first teams. And for me, that's exciting. And that was probably the most exciting part of the whole tie, was looking at our players can compete at that level. And then, it was a bit of a roller coaster of a cup tie, but the resilience that the group showed is something I'll always take great pride in, because we went 1-0 down, 2-1 down, 3-2 down, scored with a minute to go in normal time to bring it to extra time, hit the post in extra time, and then won on penalties 5-4, 4-3, sorry. So, it was a real roller coaster, but that resilience that they displayed was something that, forget quality, forget tactics, forget technical, that personality, character side for me is a massive area at 16s to 21s, and it's something that is one of the main reasons why I want to specialise in the 16s to 18s age group.
And so, I mean, you mentioned it there. What are your aspirations in the game yourself personally?
I think currently, like I said, I want to specialise in this 16s to 18s mould of players. I've had 4 years at Brentford, really doing the 15s, 16s, 17s, 18s, and then I've had 4 seasons now at Charlton doing 16s to 18s. This year being my first year to lead it and drive a programme, which is what I've really enjoyed doing. So I think I want to do another at least 2 years of really specialising in this age category of players. But I think something that has never crossed my mind until recently was potentially transitioning into first team. And I think it never really crossed my mind until I saw Carl Robinson work up close and personal. And Carl, obviously, for his age, for what he's achieved promotion-wise, the amount of games, I think he's managed over 500 games before the age of 38. Didn't have a massive playing career, non-league playing career background. But his style, his manner, and then seeing him in and around the building, I suppose, inspired me a little bit to go, well, he's good on the grass. I don't think I'm bad on the grass. But it's how you deal with people, how you deal with players. And it's probably something I've thought about more recently, and potentially over time. I'm in no rush to get to senior football. I don't want to clamber over anyone to get to senior football, but I think eventually I wouldn't mind managing senior players, whether that be as a coach, assistant coach, a head coach. Eventually, I'm talking maybe 5 to 10 years down the line, maybe put my hand to it if the opportunity arose.
And what advice would you give to a young aspiring coach who wants to make a career in the game like you have?
I think the biggest thing for me is you've got to be willing to go and work for very little reward. And what I mean by that is monetary wise, very little rewards. There's very little rewards financially anyway in youth development, so that's something you're going to have to come to terms with. But I think you're going to have to get out there and watch better coaches than you work, and then ask questions and get into an environment where you're developing yourself constantly. I think that would be the first thing. The second thing is for me to always try and remain humble. I'm grateful for the opportunities, that every single opportunity that I have. I obviously am very grateful for the chance to come to London, initially start in Westway, work my way into an academy, and then I've worked bloody hard to get to where I am now. But I think you only do that by working exceptionally hard, remaining humble, and obviously continuing to refine on your craft. And you can only do that when you're surrounded by people that are better than you. So where I am now, what Steve Avery has experienced, what he's developed, what he's achieved in the game, I want to hang on to that and learn off that on a daily basis, which I have access to him because we kind of work the 18s together. So for me to have that access from my own development is first class.
I was going to say that. I mean, you've been really fortunate. You've got your first academy, right? It's been Brentford, who've surrounded by world-class practitioners who've gone on to do amazing things in the game, who have experience, and now you're in Charlton as well, like say Steve Avery and all those other people involved in that fantastic academy. You've really been blessed in terms of being able to learn and get all this coaching gold and off these great people.
Oh, massively, and that's why going back to someone like Sean O'Connor, who's not a coach, he's a recruiter. He understands development. He opened the door for me at Brentford, and we've spoken about, I've been very fortunate to work in a real unique environment over there that's helped shape a lot of my values, a lot of my beliefs, and has given me a hell of a lot of experience. And then the differences that I've experienced then at Charlton, under some wonderful people there. And then to have Steve, who I can, lean upon for advice, for guidance, in dealing with this age group of players, as I have been lucky, but I think I've made my own luck at times. I do work hard. I think you have to work hard. I think that is a given, but I also think you have to be willing to go and do a little bit more to learn off people who are better than you. And I think ultimately, that's how you do learn. That's how you try and figure out your own beliefs, your own values, and ultimately, personality is something we've spoken a lot about. How you impart your personality onto the training pitch, onto the players, and into relationships.
Anthony, thanks very much, mate. It's been first class.
Thanks a million, Saul, for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for tuning in to the MyPersonalFootballCoach.com Soccer Player Development Podcast. MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Dynamic Ball Mastery Program is the world's leading online individual technical training program, proven and developed at the highest level in the English Premier League. Sign up now to train like the pros and take your game to the next level. Master the ball, master the game.